The morning the bank letter arrived, Claire Donnelly stood at her kitchen window and watched the mist roll over the empty pastures of Cedar Hollow. 2 years ago, this land had been full of life. Cattle grazing on the hills, her husband Daniel laughing as he mended fences, their son Eli running barefoot through the grass. Now the pastures were quiet. Daniel was gone, taken by a heart attack no one saw coming, and the ranch that once felt like a promise now felt like a burden she could barely carry. She opened the letter with shaking hands. The words blurred together, but she understood enough. 90 days. If she could not pay what she owed, the bank would take Cedar Hollow. Claire sat down at the table and pressed her palms against her eyes. She had already sold 2 horses. She had already let her last hired hand go because she could not pay him. She had already cried more tears than she thought a person could hold. There was nothing left to sell, and no one left to help. That was when she heard the knock at the door. Standing on her porch was a man she had never seen before. He was tall, with sun-worn skin and tired eyes that still held something sharp and alert underneath the exhaustion. He wore a faded jacket, jeans patched at the knee, and boots that had clearly walked many miles. A single duffel bag hung over his shoulder. "Morning, ma'am," he said. "Name's Walker Reyes. I heard in town you might need help around the ranch. I don't need much. A meal and a place to sleep would be enough for now." Claire studied him carefully. There was something guarded in the way he stood, like a man used to watching his surroundings. But there was also something quiet and steady about him, something that made her chest loosen just slightly, the way it did when a storm finally passed. She knew she should say no. She had no money to pay a stranger. But the fences were falling apart, the barn roof was leaking, and she was running out of time. "I can't pay you," she said honestly. "Not much anyway. But I can feed you, and you can sleep in the bunkhouse." Walker nodded like that was more than enough. "That'll do just fine." That was how it began. By the end of his first day, Claire realized she had underestimated him. He fixed 3 sections of broken fence before noon. He repaired a hinge on the barn door that had been squeaking for months. When the wild mare Daniel had never managed to tame reared up in fear, Walker approached her slowly, speaking low, until she calmed enough to let him near. Claire watched from the porch, arms crossed, both amazed and cautious. Her son Eli, 15 years old and quiet since his father's passing, watched Walker too. At dinner that night, Eli asked more questions than he had asked anyone in months. "Where'd you learn to handle horses like that?" Walker paused before answering, like he was choosing his words carefully. "Picked it up here and there. Different jobs, different places." "What kind of jobs?" "All sorts," Walker said, and though his tone was calm, Claire noticed the way his eyes flicked briefly toward the window, toward the road, as if checking that it was empty. Over the following weeks, Walker proved himself invaluable. He knew how to read soil, how to know when a pasture was dying and needed rest. He negotiated a better price on feed with a supplier in town, saving Claire more money in one conversation than she had saved in months. He taught Eli how to rope, how to ride, how to stand a little straighter. Claire began to notice things about him that did not fit the picture of a simple drifter. He never sat with his back to the door. When a car backfired on the road one afternoon, he flinched hard enough to drop the tool in his hand, his body tensing like he was bracing for something. He was disciplined in a way that seemed almost military, waking before dawn without needing an alarm, keeping his small area in the bunkhouse spotless and organized. She wanted to ask him about his past, but every time the conversation drifted close to it, he steered it away gently, like a man who had spent years learning how to disappear inside himself. Sheriff Tom Balch noticed him too. He came by one afternoon under the excuse of checking on Claire, but his eyes stayed fixed on Walker the entire visit. "Something about that man is familiar," Tom said quietly to Claire once Walker had walked toward the barn. "I can't place it, but I've seen his face before, somewhere official." "He hasn't caused any trouble," Claire said, surprising herself with how quickly she defended him. "He's the reason this ranch still has a chance." Tom didn't argue, but he didn't look convinced either. Meanwhile, the bank pressure did not ease. Denny Cobb, the loan officer, showed up more frequently, always polished, always smiling in a way that never reached his eyes. He kept pushing Claire toward a quick sale, offering a price far below what Cedar Hollow was worth. "You're fighting a battle you can't win, Mrs. Donnelly," he told her one afternoon, standing in her kitchen with his leather folder under his arm. "Sell now. Spare yourself the embarrassment of foreclosure." "I'm not selling," Claire said firmly, though her voice trembled. "Not while there's still a chance to save it." Denny's smile thinned. "There won't be much of a ranch left to sell if you wait too long." Walker had been standing near the doorway, quiet as always, but something in his posture shifted. He stepped forward, calm but unmistakably firm. "The lady said no," he said simply. "I'd think that settles it." Denny looked at him, surprised by the authority in his voice, the way it did not match a man who claimed to have spent his life wandering from job to job. He left without another word, but Claire saw the flicker of unease on his face. That night, after Eli had gone to bed, Claire found Walker sitting on the porch steps, looking out at the stars. "Thank you," she said softly, sitting beside him. "For today, for everything really." Walker was quiet for a long moment. "You don't have to thank me. This place, it feels like the first thing that's made sense to me in a long time." "Why did you really come here, Walker?" Claire asked gently. "A man like you, capable of everything you do, could find work anywhere. Why a struggling ranch in the middle of nowhere?" His jaw tightened, and for a moment she thought he might close off again, the way he always did. But instead, he let out a slow breath. "Sometimes a man needs a place where nobody expects anything from him except honest work," he said. "A place where his past doesn't follow him." Claire wanted to ask more, but something in his eyes told her not to push. She nodded and let the silence settle between them, comfortable despite the unanswered questions. Weeks turned into a season. Cedar Hollow slowly began to breathe again. The pastures Walker had helped restore were greener. The cattle Claire had feared losing were healthier. Eli smiled more, laughed more, and had started talking about ranching as something he wanted to do with his life, not just something he had inherited. But trouble arrived on a moonless night in early autumn. Claire woke to the sound of cattle bawling in distress, and a truck engine rumbling near the back pasture. Her heart lurched. Rustlers. She had heard of ranches nearby losing cattle to thieves, who knew exactly when properties were vulnerable, exactly when families were desperate enough not to have proper security. She ran to wake Walker, but he was already outside, moving quickly and quietly through the darkness like he had done this before, many times. "Stay inside with Eli," he told her, voice low and controlled. "Lock the door." Claire wanted to argue, but the seriousness in his eyes silenced her. She hurried back to the house, gathering Eli close, watching from the window as shapes moved in the darkness near the fence line. What happened next unfolded fast. Walker approached the intruders with a calm precision that did not belong to an ordinary ranch hand. He moved like he understood exactly how to disarm a dangerous situation without causing serious harm, speaking with commands that carried an authority the thieves clearly recognized, even in their panic. Within minutes, the men were subdued, their truck disabled, their plan ruined. When Sheriff Tom Balch arrived, called by a neighbor who had seen the truck lights, he found Walker standing calmly over the men, waiting. "You didn't have to handle this alone," Tom said, stunned. "Wasn't about to let anyone hurt this family," Walker replied simply. As Tom cuffed the men, something fell from Walker's jacket, likely dislodged during the earlier struggle. It hit the ground with a soft thud. Tom picked it up, and his breath caught. It was an old leather wallet, worn at the edges. Inside was a tarnished badge, the kind that belonged to federal marshals, and an identification card, faded but still legible enough to read the name. Walker Reyes, United States Marshal. Tom looked up at Walker with wide eyes. "I knew I recognized you. You're the marshal from that internal investigation a few years back, the one connected to the failed operation in Colorado." Claire, who had come outside despite Walker's earlier warning, stood frozen at the edge of the porch, listening. Walker's shoulders sagged, like a weight he had carried silently for years had finally been exposed. "Yeah," he said quietly, "that's me." Later that night, after the rustlers had been taken away, and the ranch had settled into an uneasy quiet, Walker sat with Claire at the kitchen table. Eli had gone to bed, though Claire suspected he was listening from the hallway. I was a marshal for 12 years, Walker began, his voice steady, but heavy with old pain. Good at my job, believed in it. Then one operation went wrong. My partner was killed during an arrest that should have gone smoothly. Command said there were mistakes made, mistakes on my part. I was investigated for months. Even though nothing was ever proven against me, the suspicion never fully lifted. People whispered. I lost trust in myself, so I left, turned in my resignation before they could decide anything more, and I just disappeared. Started drifting, working ranches, farms, wherever people needed hands, and didn't ask too many questions. Claire reached across the table and gently placed her hand over his. You saved this ranch, Walker. You saved my son. You saved me, in ways I didn't even realize I needed saving. Walker looked at her, vulnerability breaking through the calm exterior he had carried for so long. I didn't come here to be a hero, Claire. I came here to disappear. Maybe, Claire said softly, sometimes the place you run to becomes the place you were meant to find. The following days brought unexpected answers. Sheriff Tom Balch, curious and thorough, reached out to old contacts within the federal system. What he discovered stunned even him. Walker had been quietly cleared of any wrongdoing months after his disappearance. The investigation had concluded that the failed operation was due to faulty intelligence passed down from another department, not any failure on Walker's part. But by the time the exoneration was finalized, Walker was already gone, off the grid, untraceable. The news had never reached him. When Tom told him the truth, Walker sat in stunned silence for a long moment, processing years of guilt that had never needed to exist. You're free, Walker, Tom said. Fully cleared. No shadow hanging over your name anymore. Walker felt something shift inside him, a weight lifting that he had carried so long he had almost forgotten what it felt like to stand without it. He could return now, rebuild the life he had once had, reclaim the badge, the career, the respect he had walked away from. But when he looked out at Cedar Hollow, at the pastures he had helped heal, at Eli practicing his roping in the yard, at Claire watching him with quiet hope in her eyes, he realized something important. He did not want his old life back. He wanted this one. I think, Walker said slowly, looking at Claire, I'd like to stay, if that's still all right with you. Claire smiled, the kind of smile that held relief, joy, and something deeper that neither of them needed to name yet. Cedar Hollow wouldn't feel the same without you. Eli, overhearing from the porch, grinned and jogged over. Does this mean you're staying for good? Walker looked at the boy, at the family he had stumbled into without ever meaning to, and felt something settle deep in his chest, something that felt remarkably like home. Yeah, he said, a small, genuine smile breaking through. I think it does. In the months that followed, Cedar Hollow flourished. The debts were slowly paid off, thanks in part to a settlement Walker received once his exoneration was formalized, money he insisted on putting toward the ranch rather than himself. The pastures grew green and full. The cattle multiplied. Eli grew taller, more confident, more certain of the life he wanted to build. And Walker, once a man defined by badges and battles, found something far simpler and far more meaningful. He found a home, a family, and a peace he never thought he would feel again. Sometimes, the people who arrive with nothing carry within them exactly what a broken family needs to become whole again. And sometimes, the past a person runs from is not something to fear, but something waiting patiently to be forgiven. Cedar Hollow stood strong that winter, its fences mended, its fields alive, its future finally secure, and within its quiet hills, a rancher's widow, her hopeful son, and a marshal who had once lost himself, all found something they had each been searching for without knowing it. They found each other. They found home.